Syrian troops backed by tanks have rolled into the coastal city of Banyas in an escalating crackdown on anti-government protests. And the golfing great Seve Ballesteros has died after a long battle against cancer. Syrian troops and tanks have stormed the coastal city of Banyas, one of the main centres of protests against the regime. Electricity and communications were cut as the tanks moved in. There are reports of heavy gunfire and residents forming human chains to try to halt the military operation. One rights group now claims that 800 people have been killed in the past few weeks of protests across Syria. This came despite the United States warning Syria that it would take additional steps if it continued its crackdown on peaceful protesters. Richard Galpin reports.
Tank transporters can be seen in this amateur video, apparently moving towards the key coastal town of Banyas on Friday. The start of another major military operation to crush the uprising against the regime in one of the most rebellious towns. Earlier this week, protesters were out on the streets of Banyas vowing to stand their ground. But now most communications with the town have been cut, and residents are being quoted as saying there's been heavy gunfire. All this follows another wave of anti-government protests on Friday in many different parts of the country, including, very significantly, in the Syrian capital Damascus, where crowds gathered outside mosques after Friday prayers. But the protests were short-lived, with the security forces opening fire in several towns. More than 20 people were killed, according to human rights activists. At the same time, President Bashar al-Assad was paying his respects to soldiers and policemen who've apparently been killed during the protests. Despite international condemnation of the crackdown by the security forces, the president seems determined to crush the rebellion by whatever means. And at the moment, it seems to be working. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
Well, the authorities have banned foreign media from the country. So for the latest, we spoke to our correspondent Jim Muir, who's been monitoring the situation from Beirut.
There are unconfirmed reports of shooting being heard and of gunboats patrolling offshore, also of local people forming human chains to try and stop the tanks moving in. As I say, that's unconfirmed, and we don't know what the outcome of that would have been. But this all happened in the early hours of the morning while it was still dark. Now, these areas which they're moving into had seen sustained demonstrations. In fact, they put Banyas almost on the same level as Daraa in the south of the country as one of the kind of iconic protest cities that have emerged since the middle of March when the whole protests began. It would be quite significant if they're moving mainly against Sunni areas, as reports are suggesting, because it's a mixed town with a large Alawite population. That's the minority from which President Assad and his ruling family come.
Some breaking news now from Libya. A report from the Reuters news agency says that Libyan government forces have dropped bombs on 4 large oil storage tanks in the contested city of Misrata, where rebels and government forces have been fighting for a number of weeks now. According to the agency, it says that the tanks have been destroyed and that a fire has spread that's led to 4 more. That's according to a rebel spokesperson who's been speaking to the Reuters news agency. We'll endeavour to bring you more on that as soon as we can get it. Now, tributes are being paid to the golfing legend Seve Ballesteros, who has died at the age of 54. The Spanish golf star was diagnosed with a brain tumour 3 years ago. He won the Open title 3 times, the Masters twice, and led a golden age in European golf as both a player and a captain in the Ryder Cup. He died at his home in Spain. Andy Swiss looks back at his life.
Few golfers combine talent with charisma quite like Seve Ballesteros. His emotion and exuberance charmed the crowds, while his skill and bravery guided him to 5 majors, including 3 Open championships. Ballesteros grew up in northern Spain, next to a golf course, and the sport was very much a family affair. His brothers and his uncle were all professional players. Success soon followed. As well as his 5 majors, he was also a key figure in Europe's resurgence in the Ryder Cup. He won it 4 times as a player, and then in 1997, he captained the team to victory in Valderrama. By then, his playing skills had begun to wane, but his popularity never did. Ballesteros' swashbuckling style had endeared him to fans around the world. He even created his own tournament, the Seve Trophy, between Great Britain and mainland Europe. In 2007, and after years of struggling with form and injury, Ballesteros announced his retirement from golf. But his affection for the game remained as strong as ever.
It's difficult for everybody, you know, but just thinking also so many great things that happened to me over the years, I'm very lucky, very lucky.
But his millions of fans will argue that they were the lucky ones to see one of the greatest and most inspirational figures in the history of the game.
Let's speak now to our sports correspondent, Miranda Hurst. Miranda, Andy Swiss talked about how very charismatic he was as a player. How have people been reacting from within the world of golf?
There's been a very strong reaction. I think a lot of people have wanted to take this opportunity to come forward and actually say what they felt about Seve Ballesteros. You know, sometimes you have to work quite hard as a journalist to get people to come out and react. Well, not in this instance. People have been very effusive, saying what a nice person he was, that he was a friend to a lot of people on the European tour, and that he had a huge impact on the whole European game. So he is held in very, very high esteem.
So well liked as a person. What was it about his playing ability that made him so unique?
I think it was the sense of fun that he brought to it, you know, the flair that he brought to it. Peter Allis, the veteran commentator, was saying he made it look like it was fun, you know, and I think that was something that he really opened the game up to a lot of younger people, that they suddenly realised it wasn't something exclusive or something fuddy-duddy, that you could go in. It didn't matter if you made a bad shot, it didn't matter if you were trying to tee off from the car park, which is something that he famously did.
He hasn't been playing for a couple of years now, but obviously a very influential figure and a very charismatic one, inspiring younger people. Who's going to be there now from within the golf to inspire the next upcoming stars?
I think that's quite difficult to say. I mean, I think he did have a huge impact on particularly golf in Europe, you know, that there for a long period before he came to prominence, it was America that was seen as the heart of golf, and people have said that perhaps if he had been able to keep playing, he had to retire because of back problems, that if he had been able to keep playing, he might really have been Europe's Jack Nicklaus or Arnold Palmer. So I think, you know, you can't underestimate the influence that he had. And they're going to be hard shoes to fill. It'd be hard for somebody else to come in and take up that position.
Thanks, Miranda. Certainly a very formidable player.